My name is Genaro Jackson. Welcome to Power Your Story Season 9, a podcast from At the School Matters and the Creative Imposter Studios in Chicago. This season, our theme is experiences. Thank you for listening. Enjoy the show.
Hey there, it's Program Director for Power Your Story, Andrea Klunder. This episode is a little bit different than some of the episodes that we've featured recently. It was recorded in 2020, a year with a lot of things happening, of very stressful and contentious debates about politics, racism, police violence, and health and safety. We were dealing with what some were calling protests and some were calling riots throughout the country, and certainly in Chicago, in the wake of the murder of George Floyd. In addition to that, everyone's emotions were being amplified by the effects of being in lockdown during the COVID-19 pandemic. Here at Power Your Story, we were meeting for our program online for the very first time. We used to meet and record in person, and we're getting used to having conversations and recording episodes on Google Meet. And because all of the things that were happening were affecting all of our student producers so deeply, we got into a lot of heavy discussions and roundtables about COVID-19, George Floyd, Black Lives Matter, presidential politics, and more. Now, generally on this show, we don't get too deep into politics. But in this season, as we were talking about what was happening in society that was so front of mind and so stressful for all of us, we discovered that there was a strong common point of view that most of our student producers aligned with to varying degrees. One of our student producers, however, felt frustrated that every time we had a roundtable conversation, it seemed like his opinion was the odd one out. Being in the minority opinion in any group can be hard. And he felt that often when he would try to share his point of view or his perspective, or to explain what he was thinking and why, he was getting interrupted and he didn't feel like he was being heard. So he approached me to ask if he could have a chance to share some of those thoughts on the show. I took this as an opportunity to try to both help this producer articulate exactly what he was thinking and feeling, and also for me to try to understand his point of view a little bit better, since I, like most of our producers, didn't really fully understand where he was coming from all the time. It's now, of course, a few years later. We've all gotten a few years older, hopefully wiser, and have gained new perspectives and had new experiences since the time of this recording. And I was thinking maybe it didn't even make sense to publish it after all. But as I was listening back to my conversation with the student producer, I was thinking that it's important to present views that are representative of the experiences of all of our student producers during that time. And I'm pretty proud of Genaro for thinking through his values and beliefs and sharing them thoughtfully on the show, even though he knew most of us, myself included, didn't fully agree. This episode, however, is not about taking sides. It's about hearing another person's experience of what was, objectively for me at least, one of the worst time periods in my lived history, and seeing what we may have in common, what we can identify with, and what we can learn from hearing about that person's experiences. And so with that context, I offer you this conversation between me and one of our Star Legacy student producers who has since graduated and moved on from the program, Genaro Jackson.
Hello, my name is Genaro Jackson from Power Your Story podcast, and I'm here with our podcast mentor, Ms. Klunder, and we are going to be talking about my experience with me being the only student who has an opinion that's different from everybody else's, that's very particular and different.
Hey, Genaro, how's it going?
Good.
Good. So I know that you wanted to come on this episode and talk about your experience. And this came up because this season we're talking about a lot of big, important topics. Yeah?
Yes. Well, we know we've been talking about the BLM and the riots and other things that happened and talking about the pandemic. And it has affected all of us, which I do agree. I do agree that Black Lives Matter, but it's not just about Black lives. Like, Black lives is not the only ones suffering. Like, everybody else is suffering too. Like, that's in different cultures and races too. Like, you have to think about it. And you also have like police standing up for our rights. And majority of the time, most of the time, in my opinion, I think police are doing their job. But you got bad apples in the police force that's gonna actually be bad cops too, which we see that clear as day. Like, we have to understand, like, let the police do their job. Even if they're in the wrong, they could get caught later on. Like, you can even realize that, shoot, what comes from the dark comes to light.
So, why do you think so many people are thinking this way that feels different than how you're seeing it? Why do you think other people are seeing it differently than you?
Well, I honestly think, like, in our society, it's like people just don't care. Like, and then, like, they look at the fake news and don't pay attention to it, knowing that the fake news is not telling you the truth, but the truth is right in front of you, and you see the truth right in front of you. You just don't want to admit the truth.
Okay, I want to ask a little bit about your history growing up. So, did you grow up here in Chicago, Genaro?
Yeah, my whole life, for my own 20 years of my life. And when I was born, like, I was a quiet baby. Like, I was really quiet. And like, basically, when I thought about my life, like, as growing up, like, I was 1 years old, and during the 9/11 attacks, like, I was just basically a year old at the time. I didn't know nothing about it because I was a baby. So like, I didn't see that much crime compared to today. Like, it's so much hate and it's so much disgrace. Like, and then you let people get away with crime, and it's not good for our country. And other countries are looking at this.
Have you personally in Chicago, have you or anyone who's close to you experienced the effects of the amount of crime that we have in the city?
Well, actually, yes, we've seen a lot of crime, and it's like crazy. But like, in our area right now, where we at right now, it's very quiet. Like, you don't see that much issues going on in this area.
What is your feeling about how well the police in Chicago are doing their job? Like, if you were to give them a rating on a scale of 0 means they're not doing their job at all, to 10 being like they're perfect, there's nothing that needs to be improved, where would you rate them right now?
I would say like a 9.5 out of 10. Like, honestly, the police ain't perfect, which we understand, but like, majority of the time, the police is trying to ask you to do the right thing. They the higher badge. They the ones that ask you for your ID. If your hands are supposed to be on the wheel, it's supposed to be on the wheel. They want you to do this so they know that you're a safe person.
You gave them a 9.5. So where do you think that they could be doing better, or what would it take for them to have a perfect 10?
Well, like, keep an eye on the police officers that actually know what they're doing. Like, put them in the right places where they know the area well.
So one of the challenges you think with police in Chicago from your own experience is something to do with how different neighborhoods are different. Like, you mentioned that your neighborhood's pretty quiet, but there's some other neighborhoods that have a lot more problems. And so maybe one thing that the police could be educated on better would be like what the dynamics are in different neighborhoods, what the
Yes,
feeling is there, what's going on.
yes,
Okay. So that's like they could use some more resources, more education in that
yes.
area. What do you know about Black Lives Matter? What is your understanding of that movement?
Well, Black Lives Matter, they try to play this narrative like Black Lives Matter, but why would you? This is my point of view though. Like, later on, when I've kind of realized about Black Lives Matter, they were burning flags, they were tearing down statues, and doing other things they shouldn't be doing. Like, and then people look at that as peaceful protest. How is that peaceful protest?
What do you think is the problem with protests in terms of like the flag burning and stuff like that? Like, why is that dangerous or bad for society? What do you think?
I think we don't got good leadership, like, when it comes to like those type of protests or rioting type groups like that. Because like, if you don't know what you're protesting about, then why is you protesting? Like, if it's something that's not going to help the American people, that means you're not even protesting for something for our rights. That means you're not doing it correctly.
Do you think that, in your opinion, from what you've experienced, do you think that our country still has a problem with racism?
Actually, yes, because people want to play race in every situation. When honestly, this country is not supposed to be about race. It's about unity, freedom, and respect.
So those are some of the American ideals that you think are really important is unity, freedom, and respect.
Yes.
So then when you see protesters on the news, for example, or on social media or wherever it is, who are doing things like burning flags or tearing down statues, then that kind of goes against some of those ideals, right?
Right. That's basically just like you're messing up our country and don't give a care about it.
Where do you think you get your values? So you mentioned those three values that you think are really important for our country. And you mentioned that you've grown up in Chicago and you've seen, some different things and you feel like the violence has been growing. Every person has different things that influence us, right? Like we can be influenced by our family, we can be influenced by our friends, we can be influenced by the news, we can be influenced by teachers, we can be influenced by social media, by like groups that we're members of. Where do you think your strongest influences are in your life?
Well, when I think of my life and how I compare it to others, like you're supposed to put positivity in your life. Like you put God first, no matter what. Like our American flag stands on standing up for our rights and then the freedom. But the American flag has been through many, many wars.
And so, what is the significance of that for you? The fact that the flag has been through a lot of wars, what is that meaning for you?
It means that they're valuing what we need in our life. Like we're basically trying to value what is right for the country.
I feel like you really love this country. Like you feel very patriotic.
I love it 100%.
Where do you think that comes from? Like what has influenced you to feel that way?
It's because like we got a lot of opportunities, like we got a lot of jobs, we got a lot of education being put in front of us so we can learn on a daily basis. And like we have money rolling in for everybody to actually have their own house and their own family. Like this country is about freedom, respect, unity, love, and putting God first. That's one thing we need to realize. We are one nation under God.
And I know church is something that's really important to you too in
Yes.
your life. How do you think your relationship to the church or like being part of the church has influenced the way that you think about things?
Well, like, I've been in church basically ever since I was like 10 or 12 years old. But like nowadays, since I've been in church and like we got this bishop, basically the whole church, the majority of the time they like to add politics into the word of God, which is something that they shouldn't be doing because God is looking right at you, knowing that politics don't fit with the word of God. The word of God says, speak the word of God as it is.
So you have church and the word of God, and then you have politics. And both of those things are very important in people's lives, right? Each one plays a very, or can play a very important role. And so you feel like they should be kept kind of separate and they shouldn't really mix.
Right.
So I want to go back to when we were recording the podcast episodes about Black Lives Matter and we were having that conversation. And you said that you felt like most of the other students that were part of that conversation had a different viewpoint about the protests and about Black Lives Matter than you did. How did that feel in the moment to you?
It felt like to me, like at one point, they really didn't understand what I was saying at one point because I was actually explaining to them, like, if you do more research, you will understand the true point of what's really going on. And then you take the time and think to yourself and like think about the whole scenario. Like, you look at both sides, and one side is talking about destroying America, and then one side is talking about for America.
And what did that feel like to you? Like, what emotion would you describe? What were you feeling?
I kind of felt emotional, honestly, because like it
Yeah.
didn't really make sense to me. Like, why would you say that? Okay, I'm not trying to go into politics or anything, but like, why you want to blame this 45th president of the United States when he actually stood up for your rights? He's fighting for your rights.
And so when you were having that conversation, you were getting emotional because you feel like there's a lot of blame going like in the wrong direction
Yes,
and you wanted to stand up for your point of view
yes,
because there were several people in that conversation and one student who was kind of moderating trying to make sure that everybody had a chance to say something And, some students are more comfortable speaking up. I would say, honestly, that you're probably one of the students who's more comfortable speaking up and saying your opinion. And then there are some students who are a little quieter, right? And they don't always say their opinion unless somebody specifically asks them. Even though people weren't understanding what you were saying, did you feel like you got to express your thoughts and your opinion, or did you feel like you didn't get to say everything you wanted to say?
I kind of at one point didn't feel like I was expressing everything I wanted to say because, like every time when I try to explain something, when I try to explain something, sometimes people cut me off when I'm not even finished speaking
Why do you think that would happen?
because they try to disagree. But like, if you're going to disagree with something, wait till the person is finishing their whole speech of what they're trying to say. Then you can disagree.
Mhm.
It's called respect because I never done that to nobody else when they were speaking.
Are there other moments in your life where you feel like your opinion or the way that you're thinking about something is different than most of the other people? So, like, this is one situation, right? Which is recording the podcast with the other students in this program. But, like, have you ever felt like that anywhere else, like at home and social media, at school, anything like that?
I mean, honestly, I've been cut off a couple of times before, but like I had to deal with it. Like basically what I had to do was just speak up for myself, knowing that I'm telling the truth. Like if you really pay close attention to your own community, your own culture, and everything that's going on right in front of you, maybe you will understand the meaning of life.
So, do you think that it's important to have different points of view? Like, do you think that there's a value in having conversations where two people don't agree? Maybe they disagree about something, but do you think that there's any value in having those conversations with different points of view?
I mean, it's fine. I mean, I don't mind like people's different opinion, but if you're cutting me off when I'm speaking, that doesn't make sense. That's showing disrespect because you gotta like show respect to the other person too, who's trying to speak their point of view, but don't cut them off either.
And I don't know this exactly, like with your family and who you live with and where you are, Genaro, but I know in Chicago, in general, as the city tends to be pretty democratic, like in terms of politics.
Yeah,
Like we're
like
we're
I
very heavily.
honestly, I'm really just like not happy how Chicago has turned into, and then the mayor putting down a rock down like at the wrong timing when it's funny because like the Republicans are trying to fix the country. They're trying to make it better. But then the Democrats, they always want to play the blame game. They just gonna blame America first. This is how I look at it. Cause like, why play all this evil? Like, why so much evil? Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, you don't need all of that evil. Like, nobody want to see all that evil. You're spewing evil to one person, then you know it's gonna come back at you. Treat others the way you want to be treated.
So what's funny when you say that, and I know that you mean that very sincerely, but what I was going to say is that how you described your feelings about the Republicans and why you love the Republican Party and what good you feel that they're trying to do and how you feel about the Democratic Party. What's interesting is a lot of people I know would say the same exact thing that you said, but the flip. Like they would say that the Democrats are really trying to heal this country, and they would say that our current president administration, they would even use the same word that you use. They would use the word evil. They would
Right.
say the same thing as you, but on the completely opposite side. So I just think it's interesting because I'm telling you from my personal experience,
I understand.
I don't talk to a lot of people one on one who think like you.
Right.
I talk to a lot of liberal people. So it's interesting that I could take the words out of your mouth and put them in my friend's mouth and just flip which party they're talking about. And they feel as passionate and as strong and as sincere as you feel about your viewpoint. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
So, what about aside from politics? Have you ever had the experience of feeling different than the other people that you're with? Like you are the only person who is thinking the way that you're thinking or feeling the way that you're thinking. I don't know. I can think of an example of sometimes when I've been traveling to other countries and maybe I'm the only white person in a situation, like in another country. And then that can feel super awkward to me. Have you ever had any other experiences where you felt kind of like you were the odd man out, so to speak?
Well, honestly, I never really experienced that because honestly, I look at people as people. Like, it is what it is. Like, everybody's human. Like, you got your own point of view, you got your own lifestyle, you live how you live it. Like, it is what it is. But like, also, like, when I look at things, I look at it as a good thing. But like, if it's something negative and it's not of like what you would think in a country it should be, then it shows that that's not a way of you supposed to be a US citizen or anywhere in general. That just shows you that you're not being a true person.
How do you think that we can, no matter whether we decide we're going to vote Democrat, we're going to vote Republican, we're going to support Black Lives Matter, we're not going to support Black Lives Matter, whatever it is, how do you think that in general everyone can be better citizens of this country?
If they know the true values of what is presidential and what is actually American.
So, like figuring out what are those American values that are important to you
Right.
and important for the whole country.
Yeah. And any other country that's like allies with us.
Okay. And how do you think that we can, so like you have different viewpoints than I do, I have different viewpoints than you do, and we see things very differently, but like I like you and I get along with you and I'm
Yes.
happy to work with you. So, how can two people who have two different viewpoints, how can they still get along with each other and respect each other?
By listening to each other's opinions, like, and then show each other proof of like the research that they done about each person that they done, or like anything that they look up on the internet, anything that's like they think is like true, and then you can determine if you can agree or disagree about it, depending on where you got your source or whatever from.
How can two people agree to disagree about something and still respect each other?
I think the only way they can agree and disagree is if they don't look at the stuff that's not true. Because like you look at stuff that's not true, you're just brainwashed. So I've seen so many people on social media and in person that they are so brainwashed. They don't even give thought into taking the time to do research. I tell people, do your research because that will really help you in life if you do your research.
And what if we still come to the same conclusions after we do our research? I'm pushing you a little bit here, but what if we still come to the same conclusions and I say, Genaro, I respect you, but I totally disagree, but I still want to be friends with you and I still want to work with you. And you say, Miss Clunder, I respect you. I totally disagree with what you think, but I still want to work with you. How can we do that and still work together?
Well, you just let the person find out for themselves later when they realize the truth.
And so, what would you say, like overall, when someone else finds themselves in the same situation that you are in, where they feel like they're the minority in the way that they're thinking about something or the way that they're valuing or believing something, and everyone else thinks differently than them? What is your best advice for that person when they're in that situation?
When someone else finds themselves in a situation where they have a different point of view than everyone else, what is your best advice for that person? Okay, well, honestly, just let the person learn the hard way. If you know something that's not true, don't say it. Don't even say it. Even if you think it's true, just don't say it because you don't know if it's true or not. It's best to do your research beforehand and then really feel confident that you are telling the truth and showing a point of view that might be agreeable to everybody. But what if somebody doesn't agree to it? Well, let them find out the hard way. Show them proof every day until they realize it.
Why is it important to speak up for what you believe in?
Because we all are Americans. We all are people who fight for this country.
And is there anything else that you want to share with listeners about this topic or anything else that you want to say about your own personal experience?
Well, this is my advice for everybody that's watching. If you want to do your correct research, go to the correct places that would be truthful. something that's not negative, something that's not showing like burning flags or tearing down statues and then showing hate. You got to take the time to look at what you're looking at. Like, pay attention closely to the body language of that person and their demeanor. If you pay attention and realize what they're doing, then you look at the other person and look at their demeanor and look at their point of view. And then you could decide for yourself who is really fighting for your rights, who is really for you. Do your research on both sides. Like, one side is not going to be always correct, and then the other side is not going to be always going to be correct.
Okay, so thank you, Genaro Jackson.
This is the end of the Power Your Story podcast recording, and thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed the podcast. God bless.
It is my pleasure to say Power Your Story podcast is produced by Chicago high school students with production support from After School Matters and Creative Imposter Studios. Our theme music is by our very own Genaro Jackson, aka Professor DJ Sparks. We are on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube as Power Your Story Podcast. Thank you for listening and peace out.